Hey all, welcome back to the second series video of AWS Solution Architect. So in this video, we are going to start with what are the different services that AWS provides and what is the use of those services. And as a DevOps engineer or as a cloud engineer, so what are the services that we need to focus on mostly to get a job or to get hired as a DevOps engineer or to get hired as a cloud engineer. So let's start with each and every concept in detail. So the first thing is, so what are the services that AWS provides? So AWS provides a wide range of services. So AWS services are, so first one, the very basic service to host our application, we need a server. So we need a computer where application has to run and where the application has to be maintained. So for that, AWS offers a certain sort of services called compute services, right, which offers a lot of computing power and a lot of servers that with different flavors, either it is Windows or Linux or Mac OS or SUSE Linux or anything. So the different flavor of operating systems are provided by AWS, and so these operating systems are running in the form of a virtual server. So first of all, what is a virtual server? We need to understand about a virtual server when so I'll explain about virtual server when we are going to start with our compute services, right? So for now, just remember the word called virtual server or virtual machines, where all the computers in AWS are running as virtual servers, and we are going to access them. Right. So the second, the important, very, very important service is database. So database is one of the important service that we need to have to maintain a enterprise application. So the customer data, which is getting requested from the application by the users, needs to be captured and stored in some database, or let's say you have a product inventory, which has to be stored in a database, and you are going to publish that inventory whenever a customer hits on the API. So for that reason, AWS offers a wide range of database services. So we have a lot of database services again. So we are going to discuss about. So the other one, the very, very important one, where the AWS has first started with, so that is storage service. So storage service, right? We need to store the application related metadata or the application related log files or the application related images or videos or whatever it is. You need to store those in a particular storage blocks. So here we are going to have different set of storage services which is offered by AWS, and we are going to learn in detail about them in our journey. And then we have the other very, very important is the network services. So network, AWS network service, AWS network services offers a wide range of usages to isolate your cloud related resources. So for isolating the cloud related resources, we need to have a proper setup for in terms of security, in terms of networking, in terms of accessing enterprise networks to the cloud native networks. So for that reason, AWS offers different set of network services, right? So we are going to discuss about these services, and we have few more services called DevOps services, right? Those who are aware of some DevOps tools like Jenkins, Docker, Ansible. So a lot of DevOps tools has been integrated with AWS, and we are going to have a native DevOps services which are provided by AWS like code deploy and code pipeline and code commit and all the stuff. So we are going to discuss in detail about that. So as a next set of services, we have serverless. So to maintain servers in AWS, So to have virtual machines which is managed by the people, which is a tedious task, where AWS is offering some services where you don't need to worry about the servers. AWS will take care of the servers, only you have to worry about the code you have written, and you have to upload the code into the serverless services which is provided by AWS, and AWS will take care of triggering and running the application all the time for you. And the other set of services that we are going to discuss is monitoring. So in terms of monitoring, we have different services based on the use case again. Either it is infrastructure monitoring, either it is application monitoring, either it is storage monitoring and the database monitoring. So a lot of monitoring scenarios will be implemented with the set of monitoring services that are provided by AWS. So we are going to discuss about these different set of services in detail. So first, let's start with the security. So we have to learn all set of these services, but if to get started with AWS, we need to have a lab setup. We need to create a user who can frequently interact with the AWS with API or GUI. Either you can use AWS API or AWS graphical user interface, or you can also use AWS commands. Similar way of executing the Linux commands, you are going to use AWS commands for interacting with AWS console. So we have a lot of things to talk about. So let's start with each and everything in detail. So these are the different set of services that we are going to cover in our learning journey. So let's start with AWS security. So we are going to start with, so this is the AWS dashboard. So in terms of security, we need to have a proper user where you have to make that user available to access the AWS console and to perform the operations in AWS account. So here, the one service which provides entire security for AWS, where you have to create certain set of users and you need to create, you have to give certain set of permissions to the service, user to the service level and service to the service level. So all these things will be achieved by one particular service called IAM. So you go to the search bar in the ribbon and search for IAM. You will see certain list of services populated over here. The very first one is called IAM. So which is nothing but Identity Access Management Services. So for your organization, you have a lot of employees onboarded into different technologies, and they need to have access to your AWS resources. You are going to restrict the access levels for each and every employee with the help of the service called Identity Access Management. The complete abbreviation of IAM is Identity Access Management. So this identity access management will have a lot of scenarios for creating the users, creating the roles, and setting up the policies, and setting up the identities, and lot many things that we are going to discuss, right? So in terms of accessing AWS console, you have two different set of users. The very first one is root user. So root user is the primary user and the base user which is created while creating the AWS account. And you have to create a IAM user. IAM, as I already said, it is Identity Access Management System, where you have to manage your entire organizational infrastructure with the help of single user, and you need to restrict the user access levels to the organization employees, right? So IAM user is one of them. The user which is added by you manually, which is created by you manually using IAM service, is considered to be as IAM user. So root user, as I said, the user which is created while uh, creating the AWS account, right? Creating AWS account. The other IAM user is which we created using IAM service. So these are the two differences between root user and IAM user. So I have logged into my account using root user, but AWS states that you have to identify, you have to keep in mind this. Always use IAM user instead of root user. So always it is recommended to use IAM user instead of root user. To avoid security breaches for your root account, always you have to use IAM user, and you need to have certain set of access levels for which service you want to access inside the AWS console. So if you just jump into the console once, let's say for example, I want to access to AWS EC2 service. Go to the search bar and just type EC2. You have EC2 service which is populated here. We will discuss about what is EC2 and what it does. And just for access levels and to give the demonstration, just search EC2 in the search bar. You will be able to find EC2 here. So that means when you click on this EC2 API, you are going to access this EC2 dashboard. For you, it is provided with read service. If you want to have write service, for example, let's say I have a server which is stopped right now and I want to start it. When I click on and when I select the server and click on instance state, you have a drop down here where you have to start the instance, right? Instance, server, mission, all stands for same. So here, this is how I have accessed AWS EC2 dashboard. So here I'm going to access the AWS EC2 dashboard with the help of graphical user interface. So instead of using graphical user interface, you can also use AWS command line interface where you have to configure your AWS software development kit in your local machine. So that we will see in the coming video. So here, accessing the service in AWS. So the dashboard of AWS, how to access the service in AWS, the different users that we create in AWS. So we have discussed about these things. Now let's jump into how to create a IAM user. Creating IAM user is pretty much simple. Just go to the search bar and type for search IAM and click on this IAM API, and you will be populated with your IAM dashboard. So here you have different options: users, roles, policies, and identity providers, a lot of things. So here I want to onboard a new user into my AWS account. So when you click on users, you will be able to see different options here. So here you have add user, where you are going to create a new user into your AWS account. So when you click on add user, it will ask you to give some details about the user. So what is the name of the user? I'm going to use as test01. So the name of my user is test01. And if you read this description carefully, how these users primarily access AWS. If you choose only programmatic access, it does not prevent users from accessing the console using an assumed role. So here, how this test user will access your AWS account. As I already said, you can access AWS account with graphical user interface, like how you are seeing on the board now. And you can also access with a programmatic access. So for if you want to give programmatic access for a particular user, you have to check this checkbox: access key programmatic access. So enables an access key and secret key for AWS SDK, CLI, and API for other development tools. And when you see here, AWS Management Console access, so it motivates you to create a password for your account. So here I'm going to provide both the access levels. I want to access my AWS resources with AWS SDK as well as AWS console. So I'm going to give a checkbox here as well. So in the next pop-up, it is asking me to set up a password. Either you can set up a custom password or an auto-generated password, anything is fine. So, but always set up a custom password, which you will not able to forget it. And now I'm going to use my custom password. I'm going to set up a custom password. So I have set up a custom password. and I'm going to add the permissions. And the next step, which is required passwords reset, right? So if you just click on this option, you are telling to the user after logging in, after next sign in, you can change your password on your compatibility. So I'm going to uncheck this because I have provided a custom password for here, and I'm going to attach the permissions. So this permissions is nothing but this particular test user wants to access which all services. They have to give that access level in this permissions. And when you click on this permissions, so here either you can add the user to the groups, which is quite advanced topic that I'm going to discuss in the next video. And you can copy the permissions from existing user, which is pretty simple, and that I'm going to show you in the another video. And here, attach existing policies directly. When you click on it, it will populate some policies. For example, I want to access EC2. When I type EC2 here, it will give all the access levels provided for EC2. You can see here Amazon EC2 full access. You can see here Amazon EC2 read-only access. So a lot of access levels are there. If I want to create, delete, or update a mission or upgrade to the next version of an operating system, so for all these actions, I need to have write access. If you see here, there is nowhere mentioned as write access in EC2. If you just give full access, the user will have read and write. When you expand this drop down, you will be able to see the policy intent, right? Which version of the policy, what are the services that it is going to allow for you. It is going to allow CloudWatch, it is going to allow load balancing, it is going to allow EC2, it is going to allow auto scaling. So this content which you are seeing on the board is considered as a JSON script. And this JSON script will be auto generated for every particular policy that you attach to the user. And the IAM user, which I'm going to create, will have only EC2 service access. He will not have any other service access, right? So I have selected this policy and I'm going to add tags for the user, right? I don't want to add any tags for now. Let's go for next step. So review all the settings, whichever you have given here, and you can create the user, right? So once you create the user, it is always be careful that you have to download the CSV file. The CSV file consists of a very secret information which is allowed and which can be accessible over um, where you can access your where you can configure your CLI in the console by downloading the CSV. All the details will be presented in the CSV file. All right, so this is that's all how we can create a user in IAM, and that's all we can access the permissions. And in tomorrow's video, we will see how to log in into the AWS account using IAM user and how it can be benefited out of it. All right, thank you so much, guys. Have a good day. Bye bye.